Talk about the X-Files, David Duchovny. Do you remember that name? He was the actor, the star of the X-Files. He had a sign in his office. The truth is out there. Well, the truth is not out there. It is written on your heart or not. The last thing the narrow road needs right now are more files. X files or hidden files, pro files collected by people who kill people to protect other people's way of life they have become accustomed to, comforted to. Yeah, that's it. A right to privacy argued into the Constitution imagined a talk between a woman and her doctor about wanting to end the life now living in her womb. It is thought a private conversation could have gone like this. Doctor, I had sex. Now I need a world where Sarah Hughes could be a judge in Texas that was recommended by LBJ for JFK so she could be there for her place in history at the right time for a plot twist. A magic bullet will not always be a cure all. After all, I'm a Hughes too, but Salpaco put in place, as was Sarah Hughes, RFK, K. Sirhan, whatever will be, will be. Doris Day, in a sober moment, said that the future is not ours to see. Tyler, Texas, John Birch, George Herbert Walker Bush, mobsters, bootleggers, found Tesla's lost papers in every drunkard's mind focused on Atlantis. What? No, you stop it. I can still be shut down, but not yesterday. I made a vow with an intent. I was to prove everything Christ Jesus says in Scripture is true. Mission accomplished. Now the stones are crying out, shout out to the mud flood that it is a flat earth. We've had a spiritual new birth. So, anyway, I felt like my first video today wasn't quite enough. And I had some free time. Well, my time is not really mine. So here we go again. Let's talk it over. Good to see you, Sergio. I got some file stuff going on here today. Going to be a lot of listening, trying to be a whole lot of not, I told you so. Because nobody likes that. I don't like it. Here's the fair use disclaimer because noticing today that it is not the heart of the work. The heart of the work is something else. You'll be the decider of what is the heart of the work. So here's a little bit about Sarah Hughes, federal judge, Texas. She was there on Air Force One, November 22nd, after the assassination. Was in place as the only woman judge in Dallas or in the whole state of Texas for that fact. She moved to Washington, D.C. in 19, met a man, fell in love, moved back to Dallas, Texas, started her own private business. Women faced its significant obstacles, as you know. As they will not let you forget. They did not regard women as qualified. Eventually, Priest Hurden and Ledbetter, a small firm, gave her a rent-free space if she would be their receptionist, and we even would refer her some cases to be a lawyer because she got a degree. Somehow she stuck it out. There's a famous quote by her, work, 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 and no LBJ, because that way you'll get promoted. So anyway, she became involved in it, uh, received a recess appointment, October 5th, 1961, District Court of Northern Texas, to a new seat that had just been authorized. Nominated to the same position, the president said she's too old. But she was confirmed March 16th, 1962, received her commission on March 17th. She was the only female judge appointed by President Kennedy, some people's superhero. Almost didn't happen because he thought she was too old, had been a long time ally, kept thinking maybe we should turn her down. Somehow, Robert Kennedy, that's RFK, had a bill held up that he wanted, and Sam Rayburn, another powerful politician, said, no, we've got to have Sarah Hughes. Your only woman has to be Sarah Hughes from Texas, and don't just not do it because LBJ wants her. And LBJ, he got offended. Anyway, concerned over ineligibility of women in Texas to serve on juries. Did you know that? That became one of Sarah Hughes's big deals. 2 years into her tenure as a big-time federal judge, the only one, she was called to administer the oath of office after the assassination. Barefoot Sanders gave an interview. Who can swear me in? LBJ asked Goldberg. Well, we know a federal judge can. Then I got a call from the president's plane with the command, find Sarah Hughes. Supposedly, they were supposed to go to Austin that night for a dinner with President Kennedy. I reached her at home. They need you to swear in the vice president at Love Field. Please get out there. She said, is there an oath? Yes, but we haven't found it yet. They didn't read the Constitution. She said, don't worry about it. I'll make one up. She was ready to hit the ground running. There she is administering the oath on the Bible, the famous blood-soaked. Did you know that later, because this whole, he ran against Barry Goldwater. And Barry Goldwater voted, the only Republican to vote for Roe v. Wade. And she was the judge in charge of Roe v. Wade. That was one of her multiple famous, oh my goodness, yes, they had her there to be the one to say, you can get your camel nose under the tent and we'll make abortions legal for extreme cases in the first trimester. Now look at it. Abortion on demand with pills if you think you might get pregnant. Are you 486? I'm not for it. Is that a good background? We good on her? She just happened to be in the right place at the right time? Or what is this? Liberal commie.
It's political and economic integration with Eurasia, not only with China, but also with India, with Iran, with Turkey, which is a member of NATO and constantly playing multiple sides. I mean, Russia's largest trading partners now are China and India and Turkey, not the West.
What has that got to do with anything? Not even going to leave that one up. So here's the guy I wanted to introduce to you, James Ambus. We're going to look at some of his videos and let him play tonight. You know, they're from 13 years ago. I'm not saying I knew all this stuff. I am going to be honest and say I knew most of it and have been studying it a lot longer than when he finally started to get his collection. I was working in it. Fabian Socialist. This might be new to a lot of people, but it is not new to Do, Re, Mi, and You. We'll come back to some of these.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of the Global Reality right here on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Josh Reeves. This is the Wednesday.
Hold on to your hat. Even 13 years ago, we knew we were getting ripped off. There's, you know, what?
But you bring it up, and so I forget his name.
Paco?
What is his name? Oh, man, he wrote The Politics of Heroin. It'll pop in my head in a second. We've covered it. It's like a neocon kind of thing to co-op the conservative movement set up by
Joe Farah.
A neocon thing to co-op. Number one, Peter Dale Scott did not write The Politics of Heroin. Number two, he also is not a 9/11 truther. Peter Dale Scott will tell you that he believes that the official story and then Al-Qaeda did. And there's a reason why Peter Dale Scott says that. It's because he knows as well as you and I know who creates these conspiratorial movements. So he won't come out publicly about it, even though he knows the truth about it. And the reason that is he doesn't want to be associated with these CMP types, because even though he won't go on your show and say, yeah, the Patriot movement is controlled by the CMP, he knows. Peter Dale Scott.
People don't know that. John Birch Society. What?
What they had to do is, through the Industrial Revolution, they had to create industry corporations that would control food, water, resources, manufacturing.
We'll save some of that because we're going to look at a few of these things from James Ambus.
Hey,
Montgomery's
how you doing?
emails. You got to check these out.
Stuff you're not supposed to know. How you doing out there, fellow feudal serfs, landless peasants, thinking you own something? How are you? Are you tired of serving your oppressive masters yet? You should be.
How long do you think I've been tired of? But I am realizing now these could be helium bombs where they're not just smoke from cannons. This is when the United States was getting like, oh my goodness, where's Francis Scott Key? There's just plenty of bombs bursting in air.
Based in Texas, it didn't even have particularly good prospects. And H.W. or Poppy Bush was traveling all over the world. That business had seemed to have nothing to do with the size of the business itself or of its activities with offshore. And one of the things I focused on in Family of Secrets is how Zapata put this rig on an island owned by Howard Hughes, who had extensive connections, as many wealthy people did, with the intelligence apparatus, that he provided this location. They put a rig there. They employed Cuban exiles to work on the rig. And then the rig was commissioned supposedly by a couple of major oil companies, one of which Gulf had on its board Kermit Roosevelt. Kermit Roosevelt having just left the CIA, where he had been in charge of the coup in Iran against the democratically elected leader Mohammad Mossadegh, whose principal crime had been, again, involved with nationalization of resources. And so that's the background there. There's the rig. It's right off of Cuba prior to the Bay of Pigs invasion. That was clearly some sort of an operational location. And
we'll drop in on some more of this stuff. This one.
Well, I don't know if they existed then, but they did consider Jesus to be a blasphemer. He made himself equal to be God, and he was God. They didn't.
Well, they did have laws of that, and with the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and the Talmud. I mean, they were making it and they arrested him for that. And the disciples also. They didn't have religious freedom, which is the Noahide law has 0 religious freedom. So you worship what they say or you die.
Well, they claim that the Noahide laws go all the way back to Adam, or I'm sorry,
Noah, yeah.
Noah.
Hmm.
But this, of course, is not true. But if you look in Revelation, where the saints are beheaded for the word of God and for their testimony of Jesus Christ, the manner of their death is beheading, and this is the penalty for disobedience of even one of the Noahide.
I think this girl thinks they're going to do it again.
1991, the Noahide laws.
Well,
that's quite interesting.
Those laws are on the books now. They haven't acted on them, but, given the right provocation, which they're going to do one of these days.
Who knows? We'll see. Let's see. Did I show the thing? There might be some new pictures. No. Yes. That's it. Riveting. Yep, that was it. Way to go. But I do have these tabs I want to go over. Did you know that when I mentioned earlier that Damascus steel, this is the same city, Damascus. They call it the 4th holiest city in Islam. Largest city of Syria. That's been in the news. Everything is Bible news. My voice sounded funny when I said Bible news. Why does it do that? I think I'm just playing around. Anyway, this is a Bible town famous for metal making. I think they say they did it by accident. They didn't even know. Clay had that one. Verinium made the swirly metal that people like to look at, so it was super expensive. I don't believe in Muhammad. I don't believe he really existed at all. He won't pass the zeitgeist test to me. They could cool up their water in the desert. I always thought that was cool. What if they'll show any metal making things? Damascus. It's not really a part of the JFK files, but file that away. It wasn't the continuously longest, oldest, continuously inhabited city, because there was a period of time when it was destroyed and the man had to rebuild it at the cost of his oldest and youngest son, but he didn't care. People are crazy for power. So many pictures of Damascus, but it's worth it because look at her hat. Girl, stop it. You show off. Look at you. Mercedes #1. That's what they said. I saw it in a movie. Okay. Nice mosque. Nice hallway. Bab Tuma Gate. It could be a breather vent for a canal for all we know. Some sort of, first thing I looked like kind of like a piano, but it's a grave. There's a narrow alley in Old Damascus. Probably hasn't changed much since they cleaned it out from the mud flood. Damascus. Look at that. Booza. Ice cream. Don't tell me they're primitive people. Not buying it. Little shaved almonds on your pistachios. Is that what's going on there? That was it. Okay, back to the... Mary was accustomed to going to her grandmother's house every Christmas. 5-course dinner. Emphasis on a custom. I put it in the reading. People want to be kept in the manner they've become accustomed. What are you accustomed to? What is the world accustomed to? Who let us get accustomed to it? The textbook definition of a custom is customary or usual, but the meaning of being accustomed to something is that you are familiar with it or you're used to it. We're used to something that's not normal. Not normal. Uh-oh. This says that even in our marriages and everything else, the lifestyle to which you've become accustomed is no more. Unless you're super rich, is what this girl lawyer has said. No, you know, because what they figured out is you can't squeeze blood from a tournament up. You can't say, well, now you have 2 houses. He can't work so that you don't have to pay for your house or whatever it is. And so many women now, majority, I think, make more money than their husband. And now they're looking back going like, wait a minute, I have to pay alimony? That sucks. The manner of which we become accustomed. Am I just going on about that? Oh, I thought this was funny. Help. I'm terrified that divorce is going to leave my wife in a shambles. She's simply not prepared for life without me. It's part of the problem. We got married you know, about a year ago. She said, I want a divorce from my wife. We were married about a decade ago, and what? Same-sex marriage became legal so we hopped over there. They had been together for 20 years, but after 30 years of being together, she developed feelings for someone else and realized she'd been unhappy with her life with her wife for a long time. But there was a chance to get married and make a statement. File that away. So she did it. Now everybody's sad. Nobody's life is what it's accustomed to be. We're going to get back to the Birch Society, but here's something I learned today, and I'm thanking the Lord. Now I know the Transcontinental Railroad that they have in Trans-Siberian Railroad is not the Orient Express, although they're both very expensive. Check this out.
And Poland.
How expensive?
But in addition to the difficulty of transporting resources to Siberia, an equally difficult task was labor.
Oh.
The number of people to
First,
work on
how
the
hard it
project over the
is.
course of its lifespan is unknown. However, archival material and expected workforce requirements penned by the Trans-Siberian Railway Committee put the active working population between 57 to 80,000 workers.
That's about how many people they had per shift working on the temples in the Bible when Hiram was building Solomon's stuff.
Nothing like that would ever happen again. And the railway across Siberia was one of the ways in which he intended to reassert the monarchy's authority and ensure the remote territory did not slip from its control. Echoing his emperor, Konstantin Nikolaevich Posyet, the Minister of Transport for Russia from 1874 to 88, argued that, quote, until there is a railroad across all of Siberia, it will be estranged from the general system and political life of the Russian state. The unification of the nation via a state-controlled railway project, as opposed to privately constructed ones that were built in the United States and Canada.
All right,
would
so
be
we
the
just
challenge.
mentioned that, we're going to come right back to that. This is not That's the Siberian. This is the Orient. Remember, transcontinental. And then they wanted the Orient Express to be Paris to Istanbul, and they needed it at the same time. That's crazy, right? You know, we got to build these things, and no matter how hard it is, and this one didn't close until 2009, but it was expensive and necessary for the royals. But this is just, look at it. There's 3 of them, and then 4 if you count the yellow line, and then this little whoop-de-doo here. 5 lines. 6 if you count the whoop-de-doo. It's something's going on. You know it. I know it. We don't need more files. Do you really need another file? Besides the simple facts that, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do that, from the Warren Commission and everything else. What else are you waiting on? Do you need more proof of, do you need the pictures of Jeffrey Epstein's clients before you think those guys are in on it? Just to let you know that we're going to look at a little bit more of that, because it's technically, this Trans-Siberian is a little more fancy, a little bit longer, a lot more unnecessary. I mean, Vladivostok, it goes from Moscow to Vladivostok or something. What is that? Where is that? It's important to who? Anyway, this is a good one though, right? Especially this is the one. The Simpleton Tunnel has the Simpleton Oriented Express. There's different routes on these. This part of the railway owned that section of the line. A lot of famous movies are filmed here because of this Lede Viaduct and just the overall beauty of that section and their trains. I wonder if they'll have a section about the movies that have been in it. Is it? Well, no. So back to the largest, one of the largest.
Cherry on top. A rejection of Western liberalism and a vindication of Tsarist autocratic rule embodied in iron and steel.
Ooh.
There was, of course, also an economic aspect to it. The untapped potential and hidden riches of Siberia.
Isn't that always a
just
good
waiting to be
excuse?
exploited.
Oil.
Catherine the Great had called it Russia's India, Mexico, or
Which is something that white people can go into other people's lands and just say, it's ours now. We'll keep it.
Peru in that regard. However, these economic and even military considerations
Are we going to build a train or not?
Alexander's imperial train derailed near the town of Borky in eastern Ukraine. The dining car in which the emperor and his family had been relaxing in was flung from
Conspiracy
and overturned. Miraculously, there were no fatalities and no one was seriously hurt. The cause of the crash...
Somebody got fired and another guy put in charge, and he decided, man, let's kick ass. Go.
Challenge to source all of the required materials. Principally, there was the issue of transporting said
I
materials.
want to lay this out because apparently everywhere in the world, at least that they mentioned, United States, Europe, all the way from Russia to Vladivostok, Siberia. It's transcontinental time, baby.
Materials into the remote Siberian hinterlands, as much of it could not be locally sourced.
Hinterlands.
For this reason,
Is that
the
a
Committee
real
of the
place?
Siberian Railroad embarked on an adjacent infrastructure effort that saw Siberian rivers and canals expanded.
Got a little
and
yin and yang
as to
thing going
facilitate
there,
the
huh?
Siberian supply chain. To put it another way, the Trans-Siberian Railway was such a massive undertaking, it merited its own infrastructure initiative to support it.
Wow. And the United States Transcontinental Railroad was so important they had to fund it. It started the same time as the Civil War, if I'm not mistaken.
Unknown. However, archival material and expected workforce requirements penned by the Trans-Siberian Railway Committee put the active working population between 57 to 80,000 workers. This is comparable to, if not greater than, the Panama Canal's peak workforce of 60,000. Some historians, such as Christian Volmar, have contended that the workforce rose as high as 200,000 workers
Wow.
at peak construction. However, I cannot confirm if this is the case, as his work did not cite us.
They really must have wanted that railroad bad, because that's how you guess you get the supplies to the Trans-Siberian. To get it done, saddle up the cow.
2 million people from 1893 to 1902, many of whom would undoubtedly work on the railway. Convict labor also featured prominently, with the average number
forced
of
labor.
convicts on each section of the line numbering around 5,000. They were joined by exiles from European Russia.
Well, is this fancy or not?
Of them would slip or find they could not get their numbed fingers to grasp a support in time, falling into the granite-like frozen river below,
Oh.
being killed instantly. Living conditions for the workers also often left much to be desired. One newspaper, Stepnoy Litovsk, or the Steppe Gazette, reported in 1893 that laborers working on the West Siberian line were initially forced to sleep on the wet ground right up until the frost of winter set in. It was only after a year of complaints that the state contractors in charge of the line finally acquiesced, agreeing to build wooden huts for the workers.
I thought this was supposed to be something fancy.
The Russian provisional government and then the Bolsheviks into power. While I would love to speak about the historical significance of the railway during the Russian Civil War, the Soviet era, and even its place in the modern-day image of Siberia, this is a task better left to a dedicated video. As it stands, the Trans-Siberian Railway was one of the greatest mega-projects of the 19th and 20th century, involving the efforts of thousands and featuring the zeal of one of the most famous Russian statesmen in Sergei Witte. It is unique in that it embodied an ideological conflict between liberalism and absolutism, a railway that sought to vindicate the idea that state-run projects could succeed where unfettered capitalism couldn't. But like many other 20th century mega-projects, it came at a human cost. In the sense of labor abuses, poor working conditions, and of course the death toll, and also the sacrifices that the average Russian made to fund what was effectively the gigantomania project of an autocrat and his railwaymen.
Now, I don't know. I think it's a cover-up, and it comes down to everyone believes and knows that they've been lying to us. I'm trying to get you around the fact that it's the JFK, it's the 1958 DARPA, NASA, 1958 Defense Educational Act, National Defense Educational Act.
They had to create this, and then what they would do through getting capitalism to blossom is once capitalism blossomed and you had all the corporations, then they could come in and consolidate all the companies that came up after the rise of capitalism. Then what they would be able to do is then come in, nationalize everything, and then boom, once all the industries that own the food, water, the resources, and everything else are created, then you bring in the open socialist world system and you can have no competition. That's what it's boiled down to. This is how they brought it in. Carol Quigley and colleagues of like sympathy with the Rhodes Agenda have widely propagated the belief that the American branch of the Roundtable Organization is exclusively the liberal Eastern establishment. However, the Belmont Brotherhood revealed that the Anglo-American establishment, which represents the interests of the aforesaid corporations.
Wow. So this is really all we had, but I do want to get into some of what Russ Baker said, and I'll try to find some other things to play, around with this, but I do want to go about 10 minutes here of just listening to Russ Baker, and maybe he'll get to, but in the future, we'll find Tyler, Texas, and talk about the John Birch Society.
Your end at the
Okay,
end,
you
but
wanna do
really,
that later. All right.
yeah,
sure.
what I was really thinking about was the address. I think it was he was talking to a drilling association. He was also talking to a Kiwanis club. And Joe, who was Mr. Zeppo, as it was written about in a letter by Barbara Bush.
Very, very complicated. But again, just trying to simplify, I beseech folks to go to Family of Secrets and take their time and read. And by the way, some people, when they read books, they just skip around. Don't do it with Family of Secrets. It's very, very carefully constructed from page 1 forward, laying out, introducing characters and relationships. And if you skip around, you have no idea what's going on. But
This is the
basically,
spot you're going to need to hear.
Some years later, another declassified memo came to light, and this one showed that George H.W. Bush, on November 22, 1963, the same person who could not recall where he was, and the same person who, in another memo, is characterized as a secretly working as a Central Intelligence Agency officer with Cuban exiles at the time of the assassination. In this other memo, he is presented as a private citizen, an oilman, who is in a town about 40 miles from Dallas, and he's calling the FBI as it is being announced that the president has died, and he's saying, I may have some information on who shot the president. Now, this is significant because the memo, when it came to light, the more I studied, the more I concluded the only thing I could think of that memo served, because the information in it was not correct, was that he was putting on the record that he was in this other town. And then I studied the maps, and I figured out how far that was from Dallas, and it was pretty clear that he had come from Dallas, and we don't know exactly what time he came from Dallas, but through other documents, I lay out in Family of Secrets, we know that he was in Dallas the night before at a Oil Contractors Association meeting, and then the next afternoon, the afternoon after the shooting, he was in this town of Tyler, Texas. And so it seems likely, or it seems essential, that he traveled from Dallas to Tyler. And then the only question was, would he have traveled late at night after speaking at a convention of his friends, where presumably they were having a good time and enjoying themselves at cocktail hour and so forth? Or, and since we don't know what he did the next morning, or did he arrive in Tyler shortly before that phone call of 1:45 p.m. on November 22? And the likely conclusion is that he arrived by this private plane sometime shortly prior to 1:45 p.m. on November 22. Now, that plane that you refer to was that of a man who had one of the largest offshore drilling companies, and a man named Zeppa, a very interesting fellow in his own right, who had connections back to Wall Street interests and major banks, who had set up this company that also seems to have possibly provided operational assistance in intelligence activities. And so there he was, giving a ride to Mr. Bush from Dallas to a town nearby, at which point he then calls and says, hi, I'm calling from this town, and I'm trying to be helpful with a possible lead in the assassination of the president. Now, all of this is very interesting on its own, but it's even more interesting when you consider that this is a man who really, as far as the public was concerned, didn't want anybody to even know where he was at all that day.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, in by the way, for veteran listeners, in For the Record 449, and all of my programs are basically 3+ decades are archived on SpitfireList.com. In FTR 449, we talk about where the elder George Bush was officially, and he was in the plane of a Mr., according to Barbara Bush, a Mr. Zep-O. Couldn't even remember the name. I wondered who that was because I'd never heard the name, and I'm pretty familiar with the Dallas nomenclature from that time period. And you point out that it was actually Zeppa, Z-E-P-P-A, not Z-E-P-P-O.
Well, right. The reason for that is very important. You see, none of these things are accidents. In spycraft, in tradecraft, there's a lot of deception that goes on, of course, because it's all secret. And so you have to have cover for everything. And so in Family of Secrets, I lay out in great detail a role of Barbara Bush, very interestingly, in providing a kind of a deception. She published, shortly after they left the White House in the 1990s, she published her memoirs where she suddenly remembered for her husband, who claimed he'd not remember where he was on November 22, a letter that she claimed she had been writing on November 22. And it's a letter she's writing in a beauty parlor in Tyler, Texas. And she describes how while she's writing the letter, she hears over the radio that the president has been shot. And she says, oh, my gosh, that's terrible, and so forth. And then she says, now we've left Tyler, and we're on the plane of Mr. Zeppo, who's been kind enough to give us a ride to Dallas. Well, the letter itself that she purports to have written back in 1963, as I point out in Family of Secrets, there's no indication that letter actually ever existed in 1963. It doesn't make any sense that it did. But what its purpose it serves in that book is that now that all these other documents are coming out and people have reason to look at her husband's activities that day, she is basically doing some sleight of hand, sort of magician trick, directing you in the wrong direction. She is getting you to think that they got on the plane of this man and they flew to Dallas that day, rather than they were already on that man's plane flying from Dallas that day. And she then makes it impossible to figure out who that man was by misspelling his last name. Now, I assume that the former First Lady of the United States, having a rather extensive staff, a major publisher, fact checkers and lawyers and so on, would know well enough then to misspell a...
Right. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I did a show earlier today and now this one. And I do want to leave it at that, but I am going to tie it in with the fact that it was that same John Birch Society, the same Tyler, Texas, that helped Christian Liberty Academy satellite schools and Christian Liberty, the church, buy their church and their property. And so they would always have somebody that would know how to do math, read and write, but would love America no matter what. And this is all a part of the same plan. And we'll have more on that later. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening later. This is a Flat Earth Nation. The Golden Age is past because the mud flood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen.